My wife, Mandy, drives just over 8,000 miles a year, mostly on short business trips to see clients. Our detached villa in Surrey is close to the hellish M25 motorway that loops around London. It's a good place to live, but even a short drive along the M25 can take a long time. Mandy's method of beating traffic jams on the M25 is snacks and soft drinks while she listens to bubblegum radio. It helps that she loves her bright orange Volkswagen Beetle convertible. This is a completely new version of Volkswagen, with a powerful 2-liter engine, a modern audio system, a black soft top, and black leather seats. Most people agree that it's a great little car, but that hasn't stopped her from cluttering the inside with candy bar wrappers, empty drink containers, and other odds and ends. I find it funny that she drives a car designed to have a top speed of over 120 miles and spends most of her time either standing still or crawling along some of the UK's most congested roads. Mandy's first car as a university student was an old Volkswagen Beetle, and she told me she had fond memories of that car. This was before she met me, and in those days she lived at home with her parents. I didn't ask her, but most likely her pleasant memories are associated with sex in the cramped space of a Bug. When Volkswagen reinvented the Beetle a few years ago, she kept talking about how much she would love to have one. I took the hint and bought the top-of-the-range convertible she wanted for her 50th birthday. Also bought a personal registration number that she was supposed to have. It was an absurd amount of money for a license plate with her initials and the letters Bug on it. The car became known as the Baby Bug, but despite her affection for the car, Mandy didn't bother checking the tire pressure and fluid levels in the Baby Bug, so I did it regularly. Some people don't mind driving around in a car full of junk, but I can't stand a dirty car, so I also cleaned out empty cardboard boxes, paper cups, food wrappers, and other trash. There was nothing special about it, and I never mentioned it. Mandy never thanked me, probably because she didn't even notice, but I didn't mind because I always found enough change in the trash to buy a couple of beers at our local pub at the end of the day. It's not surprising that Mandy was a little careless with her change, considering we both make good money and have a comfortable standard of living. Mandy is a business consultant who helps a variety of companies develop strategies for developing and growing their businesses. I am a freelance project manager specializing in change management projects. Everyone calls me Terry. My real name is Dave, not Terrence, but even my wife calls me Terry. Why? This is short for Terminator. Change projects almost always result in some poor bastards quitting, and it's my job to do the dirty work. Mandy and I met at university where we were both studying business administration. We got along so well that before we got married, we set up our own limited company, Alpha Business Consultants Limited. Although we were young and relatively naive, we received some useful advice and financial support from my father, a respected commercial lawyer. Unfortunately, my father is no longer with us. He died of illness a few years ago. When we started the company, he agreed to become a director, and it was his active involvement that gave us the seriousness we needed to come to the negotiating table with potential clients. In return, we gave my father several shares of the company, and he was always ready and willing to share his skills, knowledge, and experience with us. In the early years, Mandy and I worked hard to build the business for our company, ABC, by building a client base that needed consulting support for strategic business planning. However, after a while, we realized that our skills were completely different. Mandy is good at helping companies plan for the future, while my strength is solving problems in the here and now. Her specialty is planning what people want to happen, and my specialty is solving problems when things don't go as planned. Both Mandy and Dad felt that ABC needed to clearly define its focus on strategy rather than implementation. So we agreed that I would work separately as an independent consultant specializing in managing organizational change projects. Mandy continued to work at ABC as the only employee. Our twin daughters, Linda and Lucy, left home a few years ago and are now both at university. But when they were children, I set up a room on the ground floor of our house as an ABC office and put a sign on the door. Office. Mandy or I could go in there and work without interruption. It gradually became Mandy's office because I work mostly in the field with clients, and she mostly works out of the office, from home. She had about 50 key clients, and she charged fees for her consulting services as those clients needed her advice. Unlike Mandy, I rarely had a full-time business, although I received referrals and regularly worked as an assistant for a large, well-known management consultancy. Typically, I would only have one client at a time, and I would work with them over a period of weeks or months, managing a major change project such as an office move or an organizational restructuring. After finishing a project, I usually took a break for a few days or even weeks before a new assignment came up. Not knowing what will happen next can be daunting for many people, but I got used to it and enjoyed taking breaks to read and improve my cooking skills. It also gave me time to do most of the routine maintenance work around the house that didn't require a professional. I also cleaned the fish tank in Mandy's office regularly. She read somewhere that a large aquarium with lots of brightly colored tropical fish helps with her thinking process, so she just had to have one. She liked the aquarium, but she was not able to bother with its maintenance and upkeep. She probably thought that PH was just 2 random letters. So in the end, it was me who looked after the well-being of the fish. I never complained about being left alone when Mandy was away on short business trips, and she never complained if I was away for a week working on a site in another part of the country. In fact, I think our personal lives benefited from these occasional absences, especially after our 2 daughters left home and we were left alone. I hope that once we became empty nesters, we could spice up our social lives by going out more often, maybe even taking a romantic weekend to Paris or Rome. People plan, but the gods laugh, as they say. Everything changed when Mandy came home one day with Little Doug. Little Doug is a Shih Tzu, also known as a Chinese lion dog. Every time I see him, I'm reminded of the joke about the guy who went to the zoo where there was only one animal, a dog. It was a Shih Tzu. I was a little annoyed that Mandy got a dog without consulting me. Little Doug was friendly enough, but I knew right away that I would eventually have to take him on walks and look after him when Mandy wasn't around, and possibly even when she was. When she got him, he was just a puppy and needed to be house-trained, so guess who got the treat? We didn't call him Little Doug just because he was small. For a while, he wrote anywhere and everywhere. Mandy adored Little Doug. He was literally her dog, sitting on her lap every chance he got. She caressed him as he lay next to her on the sofa while she watched TV. He sat on the chair next to her when we sat at the dinner table, and in the morning, he could invariably be found lying on our bed. I tried my best to dissuade Mandy from allowing Little Doug to roam freely around the house, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. To keep our love life from going off the rails, I had to lock the bedroom door if I wanted my wife to be alone in the bedroom. But even then, I remembered to unlock the door and open it afterwards. Otherwise, Little Doug would howl at me from behind the door, and Mandy would be howling at me inside the bedroom. This Sunday afternoon was no different until a piece of paper fell on the floor next to a plastic bag. I noticed that it was a credit card receipt from the Ainsley House Hotel, a huge country hotel located about 20 miles from our house. Like many large rural hotels, it has a reputable restaurant, but the main income comes from the spa and conference center, where seminars, wedding receptions, business dinners, and other events are held. There were no details about the purchase, but the amount was what you would expect for lunch or dinner for 2 or 3 people. I assumed that Mandy was treating clients, so I decided it would be better not to throw away the check in case she needed it, and I stuck it in my wallet to give later. I put all the snack wrappers and other debris in a plastic bag, tied it up and threw it in the trash, then took the little bug to the local garage to get gas and check the tires and fluid levels. The next day, Mandy was leaving on a business trip north and would not return for several days. I was between assignments and had a lot of free time. I was hoping to take her to lunch at the Fox and Hounds pub, but she said she was too busy preparing for her trip. I was disappointed by this because Sunday has always been a family day for us. Our daughters continued this tradition by calling us on Sundays, so I was not surprised when I returned from the garage to find Mandy in the living room with her feet up, clearly engaged in a long phone conversation with Lucy. After listening to the end of Mandy's conversation, I realized that Lucy was having another crisis in her personal life. Linda is the calm and quiet daughter, while Lucy is the drama queen. When their sleepovers with guys got serious, I tried to stay calm while still showing them that I cared about what was going on in their lives. They know that we are both there for them if they need help or advice, but if they want to gossip or cry, their mother is usually first on the list. What I did get was that Mandy was telling Lucy to forget it, to get back to everyday life, that there were lots of fish left in the sea, and that she should try before you buy. I don't know what happened, so I didn't know what advice I would give Lucy. I think the Latin motto festina lente is generally a good approach to problem solving. Hurry up slowly. Give yourself time to think and then decide what you want to do. No matter what happens, Lucy herself must decide what to do next. I didn't want to do my part and make her even more confused. So I just asked Mandy to say hi for me and went into the kitchen to prepare Sunday lunch. Our standard Sunday meal was roast beef and Yorkshire puddings with chips, and I found it therapeutic to put it all together, especially when I had a decent bottle of claret to go with it all. At dinner, Mandy was in no mood for conversation, although she did fill me in on her phone conversations with Linda and Lucy. Linda is in a steady relationship with a nice guy, and she was going through a good period in her studies, getting good grades on her last assignments. Things weren't going so well for Lucy, and her boyfriend dumped her after he noticed her kissing someone else. I expressed the opinion that Lucy's boyfriend might forget her kiss with someone else if he was given time to change his mind, but I doubted that there would be any way back if Lucy decided to try possible replacements in the meantime. Mandy had a very different view and seemed to think that Lucy should just forget about the relationship and look for somewhere else to have fun. After dinner, I took little Doug for an evening walk, and after making sure the little black plastic bag containing his poop was tightly sealed, I threw it in the trash can outside. Later, I sat in the living room for a while, watching TV, while Mandy went into her office with little Doug to finish preparing a presentation for her client. I loaded the dishwasher and went to bed, where I tossed and turned for a while before falling into a restless sleep. I was vaguely aware that Mandy had gone to bed much later, but when I woke up in the morning, she was already up. Instead of my beloved wife, I found myself face to face with little Doug, blowing his stinking dog breath right in my face. There's nothing like a Shih Tzu's morning breath to get you out of bed in half the time. I quickly got dressed and took little Doug to his morning toilet before joining Mandy in the kitchen. Neither of us like mornings, and Mandy always needed a couple of cups of espresso before she could start her day. We chatted briefly about the weather while we waited for the stop-start rush hour traffic on the M25 to end. Then she kissed me on the cheek, petted little Doug affectionately, got into the little bug, and went on her way. It wasn't until she left that I remembered the receipt in my wallet and decided to leave it on the desk in her office. It was at this point that I noticed that the check was cleared at 10:18 a.m. Most likely, this is payment for an overnight stay. But this did not make sense. Maybe she had some kind of business event and didn't want to go home. I could ask her later and there would probably be some simple explanation, but I had some free time and decided to check my diary to see where I was that day. It turned out I wasn't home that week, but I noted in my diary that Mandy was due to go north for 3 nights. The check was issued the morning after she left, so it appears she only managed to travel 20 miles before spending the night at Ainsley House Hotel. If she was at a business event, I could easily drop her off and pick her up, and she wouldn't have to pay for an overnight stay. I sat in her office, staring at the receipt. I didn't notice anything unusual in her behavior. We still made love regularly, but I couldn't help thinking that this could be proof that she was having an affair. I was shocked by this possibility, but most of all, I was puzzled. I had absolutely no idea that she could be intimate with anyone else, and I had no suspects. I also found it difficult to understand why she would need to book a hotel room when she could simply take advantage of my regular absences and have fun at home. Of course, maybe she did both, or maybe there was some completely innocent reason why she was staying at the Ainsley House Hotel that evening. As I sat there trying to wrap my head around what might be going on, It dawned on me that she might be doing the same thing on her current assignment. I took my cell phone and dialed the phone number on the receipt, hoping that my suspicions were unfounded. I asked the nice woman who answered the phone if she could connect me with their guest, Mrs. Amanda Carmichael. She said she was very sorry, but she couldn't do it. I was briefly relieved, but instead of saying that there was no reservation for that name, she explained that Mrs. Carmichael had not yet registered. Check-in starts at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and now it's only 10:30. "Would I like to leave a message?" she asked. Of course, I could leave a message like this. "Your husband called. He wants to know what the hell you're doing there." This would have been nice, but it probably wouldn't have given me the answers I needed, so I politely declined her offer. I made myself another cup of coffee and considered my next steps. Unlike the idiots at the helm of our country, I was not going to waste time hemming and hawing, avoiding resolving the issue, or inventing my own version of reality. Going to the hotel and meeting Mandy might not solve our problems, but at least I could take immediate action, no matter what the consequences. Perhaps there is a plausible and completely innocent explanation. On the other hand, maybe she has a bull and she's hanging the horns on me. I decided that I would have to take the bull by the horns. I put little Doug out in the garden, figuring I could clean up after him when I got back, then got into the car and headed to Ainsley House Hotel. It was already midday when I pulled into the hotel, and I immediately noticed a tiny bug in the parking lot, so Mandy had probably already checked in. I parked 4 rows away and called Mandy on her cell phone. She answered almost immediately. "Hi, Terry. How are you? I just heard that there was a serious accident on the freeway, and I wanted to check if you were okay." Traffic is a little difficult, but I didn't know there was an accident. It's on the M25, so you might have gotten through before it happened. Oh yes, I'm just passing Watford. Thanks for checking. Okay, let me know when you arrive safely. Okay, bye. After listening to this nonsense, I decided to take a walk around the hotel and see if I could surprise her. Maybe she's having lunch with her lover before they head out for the afternoon. If she's not visible in public areas of the hotel, I'll call her room and ask if I can go up to chat with her. I entered the hotel and headed to the Brasserie restaurant. There weren't many people there and Mandy wasn't visible. I decided that the lobby bar would be a good vantage point, and before calling her room, I would sit for a while and see if she and whoever she was dating would show up. I still wondered if there might be a remote possibility that she was there for some other reason and just hadn't bothered to tell me what she was up to. As I crossed the lobby, I noticed a large notice board listing the various function rooms and events happening that day. Looks like Monday was a quiet day. The only event that caught my attention was the private party at the Spa and Fitness Center from 7 p.m. I wondered what kind of private party could be held at a spa or fitness center. Perhaps these are people who want to take advantage of the amenities without being burdened with clothes. Maybe my wife has become a member of a naturist fitness group. I asked the reception about a private party. The receptionist looked slightly confused by my question and then politely said that she could not provide any information about the private party. In other words, it's none of my business. I settled into the lobby bar and ordered coffee. The waiter who served me was much more forthcoming when I asked him what the story was about the nudists at the spa. "Yes, you could probably call them nudists, but that's not all," he told me. "It's probably one of the worst-kept secrets, but this private party is a regular event held by the local club of couples advocating open relationships." "Wow, sounds tempting," I said with false enthusiasm. "Any ideas on how I can find out more?" "Easily. If you have internet access, just search for Bottoms Up Club." I took a sip of coffee, took out my mobile phone and went online using the hotel Wi-Fi. Finding Bottoms Up Club online was not difficult. If you wanted to attend any of their events, you had to join the club and accept its terms and conditions, but the annual membership fee was only £20. The club's Mellow Monday Mix and Pick evening event, priced at £49 for single men, took place at 7 o'clock in the evening at the spa of a local hotel. The website outlined how club members should dress, including advice that masks were optional. By this time, I was sure that Mandy had checked into the hotel because of Mellow Monday Mix and Pick. She seemed like she wanted to have some fun that evening, so I decided to try and catch her in the act. I didn't want to see my wife having sex with strangers, but I wanted clear evidence to use in a divorce if that's what she was up to. My plan wouldn't work if she caught me sitting in the hotel lobby, so I finished my coffee and went outside to get into the car. I pulled out my cell phone, called Bottoms Up Club, and spoke with another nice woman who processed my payment and explained that I needed to bring an ID to be admitted to the event. She said that my personal information would not be disclosed to third parties, including other club members. You can buy condoms and a variety of masks at the event, but I could bring my own if I wanted. The club's name will not appear on any records of transactions. The vendor name will be listed as SJB Services on all purchases. I returned home to do some homework, check that little Doug was okay, and get dressed for a meeting with the Bottoms Up Club. I still wasn't absolutely sure I was backing the right horse until I checked our finances online, including ABC bank accounts. Unfortunately, my horse looked like a winner. Over the past year, periodic payments were made to SJB Services, presumably for Mandy's membership and various events she attended. I printed out bank statements. Returning to the hotel in the evening, I waited until 8 before heading to the hotel spa. An attractive middle-aged lady in a floral dress sat at a large table in the spa's reception area. It turned out that this was the same woman with whom I spoke on the phone. She checked my ID and sold me a mask and some condoms. I had no intention of using condoms, but I had to keep up appearances. I guess I looked a little nervous and she tried to calm me down. Just go to the gym. You're a little late, so you may have to wait to join, but I'm sure you'll have a good time. Our members are very social and will make you feel welcome. If you are not sure about something, please ask, and they will not let you down. I put on my mask, walked through the door, down the aisle, past the locker rooms, and into the gym. There were about 70 or 80 people in the room, and the organizers tried to create a warm and welcoming atmosphere. The heating was on and the lights were dimmed, no doubt to encourage those present to shed their clothes and cast aside their inhibitions. Soft jazz played through the sound system, loud enough to provide background mood music without making conversation difficult. There was a table with refreshments just outside the gym door, but the action was happening elsewhere. I counted 8 large mats covered with white sheets placed throughout the room, and around each mat there were grouped people, fully clothed, partially clothed, or completely naked, with or without masks. Dressed in a jacket and trousers, I was perhaps overdressed for the occasion. But I needed to remain that way if I wanted to have a chance of getting what I needed. The first group I tested observed a pair of thin young women exploring each other. The audience muttered approval. The next group included 2 older couples, their pale, plump flesh rippling and glistening as the 4 tried to grab each other. It struck me as nothing more or less than a strange, nightmarish vision of a sumo fight going very badly. In the third group, I found my wife, naked and sweaty on a rug against the far wall, in the company of 2 young Asian guys. She wasn't wearing a mask, but even if she had been, I would have recognized her. Mandy has a small turtle tattoo just above her left ankle. Another 8 or 9 spectators watched and occasionally commented or encouraged the 3 participants. Fully dressed and wearing a mask, I had no intention of saying anything that would give away my presence to her, so there was no chance that she would become aware of my presence. I concentrated on secretly recording what was happening on the video camera of my mobile phone, which I stuck out from the cuff of my jacket into the palm of my right hand. I signed a confidentiality agreement to get in, but I wasn't going to let that stop me from getting the evidence. Mandy's face will be clearly visible, and I can blur out the faces of third parties later in the video. Standing next to me was a white, middle-aged man wearing a black shirt and black pants. He was happy to give some comments on the competition. I have no idea if this was intended for anyone else, but it seemed like everyone could contribute. "It breaks like a house door in a Force 9 storm," he said, stating the obvious to no one in particular. There was a pause, and then he added, "Just look how she got into this rhythm." "Yeah, she really likes to handle 2 or 3 men at once," said a naked woman who appeared to be Mandy's age, hugging a naked man of the same age. She looked back at the man in black. "We've been with her a couple of times," she added. clearly showing off her knowledge of the subject to him. "I'm sure she'll be glad if you want to join." "Sounds tempting," replied the male commentator. Part of my mind screamed in misery, but I locked it away in a dark corner. The other part of my mind was clear and focused and working to obtain evidence. So I knew there was a good chance that I had managed to record both visual images of Mandy in action and comments. Whatever my state of mind, I had seen enough and wasn't going to stick around and watch. The woman at the spa reception was surprised that I was leaving so soon after arriving, but I told her that I forgot something and would be back soon. To say I was upset would be an understatement. I tried to come to terms with the fact that Mandy was having fun with a bunch of strange men. Our special relationship was completely devalued and, as a result, worthless. I was in shock, but after leaving the hotel, I began to experience physical and mental reactions to what I had just seen and heard. Nausea and an empty feeling filled my stomach, and I felt bile pooling in my mouth, almost like food poisoning. At the same time, I experienced an overwhelming feeling of sadness, so deep that I had to sit in the car for some time before I could drive home. Slowly, my mind began to build a barrier around resentment, sadness, and grief. It wasn't any easier for me, simply because I knew all about the process of managing change under adverse circumstances. I wasn't going to waste my time in denial. She had sex with others. After all, I saw it with my own eyes. Of course, I was angry, but I accepted the inevitability of change, and I needed to respond to it, make adjustments as a result, and control the process of change to the extent possible. Grief and anger would be close companions for some time, but I decided that I would take action now. I wanted to be ahead, not stuck in a rut, trying to understand cause and effect. By the time I returned home, I already had an idea of how I could take action, control the inevitable changes, and work towards the results I wanted, not those that were imposed on me. I waited and saw if I would feel the same in the morning. Festina lente. Meanwhile, I took little Doug out for a short walk so he could do his business, and then tried to dull the pain with a couple of sips of Glenfarclas. I didn't sleep well and felt like crap the next morning, but little Doug and I were going on a trip. I've always thought of Cornwall as England's toe. It is as far southwest as you can get and faces the open Atlantic Ocean. Today, much of Cornwall is practically a retirement home for wealthy retirees from London who have bought up all the small cottages that were once the homes of Cornish fishermen. The hard-working fishermen were replaced by the silver-haired and wrinkled Mr. and Mrs. Beach. Many of these seniors have pet dogs to keep them company and provide an added incentive to stay healthy by going for a walk every day. I thought about taking little Doug to Belgium, but he didn't have an electronic chip installed and he doesn't have a pet passport, so that's not possible. It's probably a good thing he doesn't have a chip implant because he could be tracked. In any case, Cornwall was further from Surrey than Brussels. The drive to Newquay took over 5 hours, with a short stop along the way to allow little Doug to stretch his legs and relieve himself of the load I had packed and thrown away. The sweet lady at the animal shelter happily took him from my arms when I told her that I had found him wandering the streets of Newquay, without a collar or any other sign of who might be his owner. She immediately recognized little Doug as a Shih Tzu, and I tried to tell her my joke about the zoo, but she didn't get it. She assured me that the dog would easily find a home, even if her owners could not be found, since she was exactly the kind of small dog that older people were looking for. For my part, I was glad that little Doug didn't whine when I left. He just looked a little puzzled. On the way out of Newquay, I decided to find a country pub for a late-night bite. When I asked the man behind the cash register at a gas station where I could get lunch, he said, "You can go to the White Horse." I probably looked at him in surprise for several seconds until I realized what he wanted to say. The White Horse Hotel was nearby. Soon I was sitting alone at a table in a quiet corner of the pub with a plowman's lunch and half a pint of good ale. I checked my cell phone for text messages and then called Jim Savage. Jim is a senior partner at a large management consultancy based in Surrey. Mandy and I have known Jim for a long time because he is ABC's main competitor. Jim is a fairly likable character, but he's kind of a wolf in sheep's clothing when it comes to running a business. Soon after Mandy and I started ABC, Jim tried everything he could to neutralize us. He offered us a well-paying job if we closed ABC and went to him. There is no doubt that Jim would have hired us, but would have gotten rid of us a little later when it became convenient for him. Over the years, we did not accept Jim's offer, but we met with him from time to time at various business events held by the local Chamber of Commerce. Jim was very interested in what I had to say. Despite the urgency, he agreed to meet with me the next day. When I got back to Surrey, it was already early evening, and I decided to call Mandy and tell her about little Doug. I still felt angry, but at least I was able to take action to calm that anger. I was sure that I could talk to her without telling her what was on my mind. By coincidence, my cell phone rang before I could call her. "Hi, Mandy," I said. "I was just about to call you. I'm afraid I have very bad news. This afternoon, little Doug somehow got out of the garden. He ran onto the main road and was hit by one of those damn multi-axle trucks." "Oh my God!" she cried out in fear. "What's happened? Is he okay?" "Sorry, Mandy, I'm afraid he's gone. I didn't see it myself, but a passerby came to me. She said that she saw the dog slip under the gate of our garden and run down the street. She couldn't stop her. The truck driver did not stop. Perhaps he didn't know he hit a small dog. There was nothing I could do. Buried him in the back garden." On the other end of the line, Mandy sobbed for a long time and then muttered something about her poor little Doug. "Actually, I thought about killing the dog, but it seemed a bit too much." "Well, I mean, you have to draw the line somewhere. I can't blame Tiny Doug for Mandy's decision to have sex with others. If I killed him, I would become a cold-blooded dog killer. He is not a wild animal like, for example, a wild goat. It also gave me a lot more satisfaction to know that little Doug was alive and well and living in Cornwall, while Mandy thought he was dead and buried. I expressed my condolences to Mandy and offered to buy a small headstone for Doug's grave. This sent her into another fit of tears, and we ended the conversation. She was clearly heartbroken, and there was no doubt that she would cry for a long time that evening, mourning her loss. My meeting with Jim Savage that same day went very well. After I explained what I needed, he said that he was pretty sure his company would agree to do the deal on the terms I proposed, and that he would have their corporate lawyer prepare a draft agreement for me to review as soon as possible. On the way home, I stopped at one of the real estate agencies in our area and talked about what they thought our house might be worth on the market. I thought that was a hell of a lot of money. Mandy and I were discussing what we would do in retirement, and our plan of action included keeping the house and renting it out. We discussed it with our daughters, and they decided it was a good idea, as long as we didn't sell the house. Now I had to make some changes to my game plan. I didn't call Mandy that night, although she was probably waiting to hear how she was coping with the loss of little Doug. I thought about it, but I wasn't going to be sympathetic. She would handle it herself and return home late the next day. According to what she told me, she was somewhere near Manchester, but who knows if that's true. Whatever she was up to and wherever she was, all I know is that I slept a little better that night, getting a little revenge for the grief she caused me. I woke up early and wondered for a while where little Doug was, until I remembered that he was no longer with us. I was blessedly relieved that I would no longer have to feed and water him, walk him, and bag his crap. This fleeting thought was immediately replaced by the return of the realization that I had much more serious shit to sort out. In England, divorce lawyers are called family lawyers. They specialize in family law, which, from what I can tell, mostly deals with divorce and death. There are many to choose from, and there isn't much difference between them. I didn't need anyone local, so I called and made an appointment with a family solicitor in Dorking. The name of the city appealed to my twisted sense of humor, and it was not far away. I was given an appointment for the afternoon. With time to spare, I checked the Driver and Vehicle Licensing Authority website for personalized registration plates, then visited a jewelry shop and did some grocery shopping before heading to Dorking. In between, I made phone calls to several business partners. By the time I got to the family law firm's office, My nerves were already a little frayed. I never expected to find myself in this situation. The secretary tried her best to calm me down and brought me a cup of coffee while I waited. The lawyer turned out to be another middle-aged woman who listened carefully to my story of grief, but warned me not to rush too much. For a brief moment, I wondered if she shared my wife's passion, but then I realized that she was probably interested in delaying the process in order to make more money. In my experience, lawyers are greedy people and rarely turn down potential clients regardless of the circumstances of the particular case. I pointed out to the lawyer that the divorce petition could be withdrawn at a later stage. Of course, from my perspective, it was unlikely, and the lawyer probably didn't care one way or the other. But she seemed satisfied that we had discussed options and agreed to file for divorce on the grounds of Mandy's infidelity. When Mandy returned home that evening, she was deprived of her food. It didn't help that I decided to make an extremely spicy beef curry. It was one of my favorite recipes, but she couldn't stand it. This was fine with me, plus it gave me an excuse to drink some of the excellent Scottish craft beer that I love so much, over dinner. I told her about the new contract I had managed to secure while she was away. I explained that I would be working up north in Yorkshire for a while, and I guess she decided it would just be another project, like all the others I had been working on all these years. She was still very sad about little Doug and was disappointed to learn that I was leaving for Yorkshire the next morning and would not return until late on Saturday evening. I didn't want to seem completely heartless, so after dinner I hugged her and we sat and watched TV. She cried quietly for little Doug, and I quietly breathed the fumes of beer and curry on her. My trip to Yorkshire was very fruitful. The deal had already been concluded over the phone, and the client had all the papers ready to sign. I knew several directors, and they were absolutely thrilled that I accepted an initial 6-month assignment with the prospect of moving to a permanent position. In addition to my fee, they agreed to pay moving costs, temporary accommodation in a local hotel for 2 weeks and a half, the cost of renting a property in Yorkshire for the remainder of the period. Everything was ready so that I could begin work more or less immediately. Now, all I could do was consciously move away from Mandy. My cell phone rang that evening right after I checked into the hotel. I was looking forward to a pint or two of local Yorkshire ale and didn't want to waste time on the phone with Mandy. Mandy discovered the fish swimming lifelessly in the afternoon and tried her best to gently break the news to me. She was completely unaware that she was talking to the fish killer himself. I just didn't feed them anymore. "I'm really sorry I had to give you bad news, especially after you had to hold little Doug," she said. "I have no idea what happened, but there was nothing I could do to save them." "I think you're right, Mandy," I replied. "It's too late to save them. Leave the tank, I'll clean it and disinfect it when I return tomorrow." That Saturday, the atmosphere in our house was very subdued. It was only a short stopover for me as I had returned early in the morning and was planning to return to Yorkshire on Sunday. I had a list of things I had to do, including sorting through a pile of paperwork. Mandy went shopping and cooked dinner, which took her mind off my tasks, and we spent a quiet evening in front of the TV with a glass or two of wine, watching inflatable celebrities take part in television chat shows. Neither of us was in the mood for intimacy, probably because we were both too physically and emotionally exhausted for various reasons. To my surprise, for the first time in several days, I managed to sleep well. When I woke up, the shock in my body seemed to have eased and my mind had adjusted to the new reality. Feelings of alienation, uncertainty, and despair receded and were replaced by a grim determination to continue working and bring the best out of the bad. I still felt sad and empty inside me, but I knew that I was far from melancholy and had gained control of my emotions by focusing on the short-term results that I could achieve. After lunch, I packed up the car, kissed my wife goodbye, and drove off to Yorkshire. Mandy must have been shaken to her core when she was served with divorce papers a few days later. She had no warning, and I guess she thought she was just signing for some business papers. Of course, I knew when this would happen and made sure my cell phone was turned off that day. I'd like to think I wasn't being petty or cruel because I was very busy at work, but I have to admit that I liked the idea of not being on call for those few hours. Returning to my hotel room after work, I turned on the phone again, read the text messages, and listened to the voicemail. The gist of them was that she was upset, confused, and angry. I called her back without hesitation. "What the hell is going on, Terry?" she asked, getting straight to the point. "That's exactly the question I asked myself, Mandy," I replied. "But that was a week or so ago." "I don't understand what you're up to, but I wish you would stop it," she said. "This is already beyond the bounds of a joke. It's actually like you're reading my script, Mandy." "What do you mean?" she asked. "Well, Mandy, at some point I wondered what you were up to," I told her. "Unfortunately, it's too late to stop it now, and it's definitely gone beyond the scope of a joke." "What are you talking about, Terry?" "Ainsley House Hotel and Bottoms Up Club." There was a pause, followed by a long sigh. "I'm so sorry, Terry," she said. "I really don't know what to say. I thought you'd never know, and what you don't know can't hurt you. Mandy, I found out, I know about it, and it hurts. Terry, we need to talk about this, but it's not something we can do over the phone. Will you come home on Friday?" she asked. "I don't think talking will help much," I told her. "I'll arrive on Saturday, Mandy, but I need to be back in Yorkshire by Sunday evening." When I returned on Saturday afternoon, Mandy looked very worried. I didn't unpack my things because I didn't know how events would develop. I planned to stay the night in one of the guest bedrooms, but wanted to be able to go somewhere else if things got difficult. In the face of life-shattering damage to home, family, or friends, Britons tend to put the kettle on and make some tea. Mandy soon sat us down in the living room with a cup of tea, and I waited patiently for her to speak. "First of all, I have to lay my cards on the table and say that this whole mess is my fault, Terry." I said nothing. "The fact is that I gave in to temptation. I found out about the Bottoms Up Club almost by accident, and then I couldn't stop thinking about it. You weren't home when I first came. I was incredibly nervous, to the point of wearing a masquerade mask, because I thought that if I could hide my face, people wouldn't see me. I thought I could just be an observer, watch while other people performed, and put on a show for others." I waited for her to continue. "At first, everything was as I had imagined," she says. "But then different people began to approach me, and this turned me on incredibly. It didn't take long before I allowed myself to be persuaded to take an active part. It was kind of scary, but after doing it the first time, I realized that these people are some of the most sincere, honest, and safe people I've ever met, which is another reason why I kept doing it. I found that I liked it. I like watching other people have sex, and I like being watched during sex. Part of this has to do with the idea that sex with other people can just be fun. It doesn't have to be such a big deal." She looked at me with hope and expectation. "I agree, Mandy," I replied. "Sex with other people can be fun." She smiled at me encouragingly. "As far as I'm concerned," I continued, "if you have no obligations to anyone else, you can do whatever you want, as long as it's between consenting adults." I sat and sipped my tea, watching her smile quickly disappear, and waited to see how she would react. As far as I could tell, Mandy acted as I expected. She had a plan, and she was going to implement it. She admitted that there was a mistake in her plan for which she was responsible, but there was no evidence of an apology, no regret for the damage caused, and no indication that the plan would be canceled. I knew her well enough to know that she would act like a dog with a bone. "What I did from time to time with other men did not affect my feelings for you, Terry," she said. "I love you very much, and our life together is wonderful. I just hope that you can understand that having fun with other men from time to time in a safe environment does not pose any threat to what you and I have. If you're not interested, you can just ignore it. If you're not there, you won't see anything." "I think you're wrong, Mandy," I replied. "Anyway, I'm afraid it's too late for me not to see anything." "What do you mean?" she asked. "I know that you found out about payments to the hotel and club. Are you saying you saw me there?" I looked into her eyes. "If I remember correctly, around 8 o'clock on Monday evening a couple of weeks ago, you were having fun with 2 young Asians. Some people said that you like sex in public." "Oh my God," she gasped. I am so sorry. Seeing me there must have given you a terrible shock, but please try to understand that it was always just a physical activity. It was nothing but an exciting adventure. That's all it could ever be. Believe me when I say that, I don't love anyone else and wouldn't want to love anyone else. Looking back, I know I should have talked to you, but I wasn't sure I could tell you. Well, you're right about that, Mandy, I said. I wouldn't be happy if you told me what you were up to. Maybe it was more exciting for you precisely because you couldn't tell me about it. I know you must be feeling hurt and disappointed, and I can understand your point of view, Terry. I agree that I may have made an error in judgment, but filing for divorce is an extreme reaction, don't you think? I don't think that's an extreme reaction under the circumstances, I replied. You decided to betray me by giving yourself to others. In my understanding, this is unacceptable, which is why I want a divorce. Mandy's shoulders slumped and she sighed resignedly. Can we at least think a little bit about what this will mean for all concerned before we go down this path? I just think we shouldn't give up on the status quo without thinking about the consequences. I'm already considering the consequences, I replied. We can take some time to think it over, Mandy, but it's unlikely that I'll change my mind. I left Mandy alone with her thoughts and went to the Fox and Hounds pub for a beer. I love pubs, but I never felt completely comfortable at the Fox and Hounds. Despite all the years we'd lived in the area, I wasn't going to miss it that much. The clientele was largely middle-aged, middle-class, pretentious assholes, and any day of the week, given the choice, a pint of Yorkshire ale would beat a watery southern beer. As I sipped my stale, warm, and relatively tasteless local beer, I contemplated my next steps. When I got back, Mandy had already started getting ready for dinner, so I went upstairs, carried my bag into the guest bedroom, and grabbed a couple of things I needed from the master bedroom. Our conversation over dinner was mostly about what our daughters were doing. Lucy had apparently taken Mandy's advice and was on a free search, looking for a replacement for her ex-boyfriend, who was now dating Lucy's BFF, much to her annoyance. I asked Mandy what a BFF was, and she explained that it stood for Best Friend Forever. It seemed unlikely to me that this girl would have this status for a long time. I've always considered Mandy my best friend. She knew that my attitude towards her was now comparatively cold, but I don't think she realized how much things had changed, perhaps because I was not rude or impolite. She seemed to be under the impression that our conversation that afternoon had led to some kind of ceasefire agreement. I wasn't going to dissuade her of this. On Sunday morning, I got up early, made myself some toast and coffee, packed my things, jumped the bug, and headed off to Yorkshire. I thoroughly checked and cleared the car of everything that belonged to Mandy, including several business files that I found lying in the back seat. I had already passed Watford when my mobile phone rang. "Where are you?" Mandy asked. "Did you happen to take the baby beetle to the garage?" "No," I answered. "I picked up the little beetle and am heading back to Yorkshire." "I don't understand. Are you saying that you have already left? Why did you take the little bug? And why didn't you say goodbye? I just decided to take a crumb of a beetle, and you were still sleeping." There was a pause as she processed the information. "I don't understand," she finally said. "What should I do without a bug crumb? You can use another car. Well, the one I usually drive. I still don't understand why you took my car, but I know you're not yourself right now, so I'll let you go this time. I'll make do with another car for a few days. Just drive carefully and make sure not to damage the beetle crumbs." By the next day, I was the proud owner of a small red Mazda MX-5 convertible that I spotted on the lot of a dealership in Yorkshire. I partially traded the bug minus the personalized registration plates. All the paperwork was done, and I posted an ad for the personalized registration plate on several websites. Mandy was very annoyed when she called me last week and found out that I had no plans to return from Yorkshire. "But how can I get my car back?" she asked. "No way," I told her. "I sold it." "What do you mean sold?" she screamed. "This is my car." "Actually, Mandy, it's not technically true," I replied. "I bought it, and my name is on the registration document." "But it's not fair, Terry." "Maybe yes," I replied. "I suppose you could argue that I gave it to you, and it's unfair for me to take it from you." but it's not much different from what you did to me." "Oh, stop it, Terry," she said. "It's not the same thing at all. You're just petty, but I understand what you mean. If you stop this nonsense and just return home, we can discuss everything rationally, settle it, and move on with our lives. Leave it to me, Mandy," I said, "and I'll come back to you." For the next week, Mandy called me every day, asking me to come back to Surrey to talk to me and try to figure it all out. The conversation was always the same until the day she found out that I had sold my stake in ABC. "How could you make such a decision alone?" She tormented me. "Why didn't you talk to me about this? I am the second shareholder of our company, so you should ask me before doing such crazy things." "Reasonable questions," I answered calmly. "I know that you are the second shareholder of ABC, and I know that my actions will seriously affect you. Believe me, Mandy, I completely understand that you are angry and upset that I made a decision unilaterally without consulting you. I am quite sure that you would not approve of my intentions, but in fact I did not need to ask you about the sale of my shares in ABC. I know how you feel because I felt the same way when I learned about your decision to have sex with others. I'm sorry you're upset, but no matter how you feel, the decision cannot be undone. You'll just have to accept what happened and adapt to any changes that happen as a result." "You're a bastard, Terry," she growled. The next time I called, a few days later, she was screaming and yelling at me, choking with rage, so much so that it was difficult to understand what exactly she was saying. When we started the company, we each had the same number of shares. She didn't realize that I had inherited my father's shares, which increased my share to 51%. It came as an unpleasant surprise when ABC's new majority owners froze the company's bank accounts and sent it an invitation to an extraordinary general meeting to consider proposals to replace the board of directors and complete the takeover. Mandy angrily told me that she now had no access to ABC's cash reserves. "Don't you understand, Terry? ABC had over $200,000 in the bank. Because of what you did, we no longer control these funds. I do not know what to do. Now we cannot get this money for our pension." "Sorry to have bad news," I managed to say when she paused briefly. "But at least you still have a job." There was a sharp breath. "Oh my God!" she gasped, realizing what I said. There was silence, and then I heard the unmistakable sound of mournful sobs before she passed out. I think Mandy eventually realized that the deal I made with Jim Savage took ABC's finances and other resources into account. She didn't know that in exchange for 51% of the shares, I received twice the average annual turnover of the last 5 financial years, plus the equivalent of cash reserves. Another part of the deal was that Jim offered to retain Mandy as general consultant for at least 2 more years at a benchmark annual salary and additional performance-based benefits. Jim wasn't a sucker. I just knew keeping her as the face of ABC would be a good thing. During the divorce proceedings, our house was sold. Buying and selling houses in England is not easy. Bids are often contingent on other deals being made in a chain, where the bidder is counting on someone else to buy his property before he can buy yours. Not only that, but the best offers may be outbid at the last minute by someone offering more money after the official closing date. This is exactly what happened to our house. The best offer on the closing date was conditional on other transactions in the chain that would eventually result in us receiving money. However, the day after the closing date, the real estate agent received a slightly better offer, without chain or other encumbrances. I was very pleased when we decided to accept the unconditional offer, and I think Mandy was relieved that the deal went through. By this point, she had completely accepted the fact that we were going our separate ways. The deed transferring ownership of the home identified the new owners as Max Payne Associates. I made sure that the identity of the person behind Max Payne Associates was not revealed. I decided that this was a good investment. The house was in a prime location and could easily be rented out to create an additional source of income for a change management consultant living and working in Yorkshire. I haven't spoken to Mandy for quite some time, but she recently called me and asked if I had seen her wedding dress. Our daughter, Linda, and her boyfriend are about to get married, and it looks like Mandy really wanted Linda to wear her wedding dress on her big day. Mandy thought it might have been mistakenly packed and put with my things when we separated. "Sorry, Mandy," I said. "I have no idea where your wedding dress might be." I always try to tell the truth. I have no idea where the dress might be now because I took it and sold it to a lovely lady in Yorkshire who has an almost new shop. There's no way I would let my wife keep this wedding dress. Apart from her breaking her vows, I was determined to prevent my daughters from wearing it if or when I escorted one of them to the altar. Lucy called me a few days later. "Mom is furious, Dad," she exclaimed melodramatically. "She just found out that the diamond ring that symbolizes eternal love that you gave her several years ago is cheap jewelry. It costs almost nothing." "Oh God, what a pity," I replied. "She probably thought it was a very valuable ring and must feel very disappointed and unhappy. I think she would never have known the truth if she had not checked. Sometimes this happens in life. People attach value to things and then feel terribly disappointed if the value of something turns out to be much less than they thought. Of course, the original ring is safely locked in a safe deposit box in my bank. Who knows? Maybe it will come in handy if I find someone special. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.